Hey guys, man, we have been having a blast here at SnowBlast 2017, and I don't think today has been any different in that. I think that we have been having a good time, but we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit. So like the first two nights we talked about vertical relationships. We talked about how we should interact with God and how our relationship with Him has to be in good standing before we move forward and into our horizontal relationships, right? We talked about this morning with our friends and our family and our dating relationship, and how we have to bring God into that. We have to bring God into those relationships, because if we fail to do that, we're missing what those relationships could really hold. And yeah, like we may have good relationships with all of those things without bringing God in, but how much better could they be if God was in part of the picture? So that's what we kind of have talked about. That's kind of where we're at right now, and we're going to shift gears. We're going to shift gears big time tonight. We're going to talk about something that I don't believe is talked about enough, and I don't think that we have maybe even heard so much about what the effects of what this topic is. And we're going to talk about porn and masturbation tonight. That's what my shirt says. Porn kills love, and this is a huge thing in our culture. This is not something that is just like only like a select few people struggle with it and that's it. No, 90% of students from the ages of 12 to 18 struggle with this and have been exposed to pornography, whether they've been exposed, they have struggled with it, or they are struggling with it. Many of us have or are going to struggle with this. And this is not something that we should feel comfortable about. And I don't believe that we are comfortable about this. I don't believe this is something that we're going, yeah, like I'm good, like I'm happy to be here. I think this is something that we have got to go, what's really here? And I know this is something that I struggled with. For many years dealing with pornography and masturbation. And it wasn't until someone just grabbed a hold of me and said, listen, your desire for Jesus, your pursuit for Jesus needs to be greater than your desire for touching yourself. Man, that was the turning point. It made me go this way, and it made me completely change course and redirect and go a different way. And I can tell you right now, like that's something that I have not struggled with now for quite a while. And it's freedom. It's freedom that you can't know that you are missing out on until you have experienced it. It's carrying that weight, it's carrying that boulder, that 100-pound boulder on your back with no break, with no rest. And then when you give it up to Jesus, and that freedom comes then. Freedom is then there, and it is so good, and it is so peaceful, and the burden is just lifted off of you. And it's incredible. I know some of us are burdened today. I know some of us are burdened about what porn and masturbation is doing to you. Because you see, porn and masturbation, it ruins many things. It ruins marriage. It ruins our view of marriage, our view of love, our view of men and women and how they should relate to us. It ruins families. I mean, porn is a killer. Porn is full of destruction. It is destroying what love is, and it is destroying what God's foundation was built on. And it pains me to say, like, I took those views of what I had seen on a screen into marriage, and I looked at going, wow, like, this is what marriage should be like, and this is how my wife should interact with me, and it's so far off from the truth. I mean, it's so crazy off the truth that it hurts. It hurts, and instead of running to God and going, hey, like, what is marriage? What do I have in store for me? I picked it up on a screen, man, and it was a terrible place to be at, and it was not a good thing to want and to desire and to get those views and those thoughts on. So we're going to be talking a little bit about porn, and I don't want to sit here and say, hey, porn is wrong and you shouldn't do it, because it's true, you shouldn't. But I also don't want to tell you that God hates sin, because it's true though. I mean, God does hate sin, but and I believe that very firmly, that porn and masturbation is part of that sin that God does hate. But God hates all sin, and all sin is created equal in His eyes. And man, those when I was told those things, those never worked. Those never got through my mind. And maybe it does with you. Maybe just me saying that is enough for you to go, all right, I'm done with this. Like, I'm moving on. I'm out. And that's awesome. That's awesome if that is where you're at. But man, I can tell you right now that didn't work on me, and maybe that's not really working on you either, because I think we all know that it's wrong and it's not normal that we should be struggling with this. And so we're going to dive deep into this topic tonight. We're going to dive deep into how porn affects our brain, how porn affects our heart, and how porn affects our world, and how it's just destroying love. So our first thing that we're going to look at is how porn affects our brain. Check out this video.
Recently, a supercomputer managed to do what no computer had ever done: simulate 1 whole second of human brain activity. How long did it take the computer to accomplish the task? 40 minutes. That might seem like a long time if, like most of us, 1 second of brain activity amounts to something like, "I want a sandwich." But your brain transmits more messages than all the phone calls across the world, sifting through a non-stop flow of input from the eyes, ears, and other senses, even if you're just making a sandwich. Consider the brain. 50 billion neurons, a trillion glial cells, 4 miles of blood vessels, all dedicated to making an enjoyable life possible for you. Need food, shelter, and sleep? Your brain is designed to go after whatever it takes to survive. Your brain is also wired for companionship, with neurochemicals released in response to intimacy. Even if you're alone, staring at pornographic images on a screen. In that moment, the brain's powerful machinery kicks into gear, bonding us in different ways to images on the screen. Studies show that over time, many can develop a compulsion to pornography, causing them to need more of it, more often, and more hardcore versions just to feel normal. Just like with mood-altering drugs. The amazing brain, in other words, can be hijacked. Image after image, your expectations of sex, love, and relationships can evolve, with your own sexual preferences changing dramatically as you continue to seek out more shocking content. No surprise, then, that in comparison, people and activities you used to really care about seem less interesting. The good news is that the same processes that shape the brain in one direction can shape it in another. Hundreds of research studies prove that brain pathways can move in healthier directions. That's true for all of us, and there are lots of ways to help that happen. The only question that remains is what pathways you'll choose for yourself. So choose reality. Choose love. You were born with a machine in your head more powerful than the world's fastest computer, your brain. Take care of it. It was made to take care of you.
Man, who knew that porn would affect our brains so much? I know I didn't. I know I didn't think about that at all. Like, I didn't think that was a thing. I didn't know that really messed with our mind as much as what it did. So as I was doing research with this, like it helped me to understand how we even get addicted to something, because we have to come to the conclusion that pornography is an addiction. We have to believe that. I think that that's something that we just don't really think about. It's not something we want to believe. It's not something we want to throw out there. But pornography is an addiction, and let's kind of just go over how an addiction kind of begins to grow habits, and how it begins to kind of just grab you and hook you in. So our brain works on 2 reward systems. The reward system that kind of just makes you feel like when you get excited about something, those chemicals that are being released are called dopamine. And dopamine is a good chemical, like it's a great chemical. It makes you feel kind of pumped up. It kind of gets you amped up, like you feel good. You feel like you can kind of, run through anything. You can get a runner highs from it. You can also get drug highs from it. Like there's things that the dopamine does benefit you with, but also very negative things too. And dopamine is this chemical that just is released when you get excited. And the second part of the reward system is the reward system for pleasure, the reward system for satisfaction. And that chemical is called endorphins. And endorphins are released when you get to the point of satisfaction, whether that is having sex and getting to that point where you are satisfied, or whether you are finishing a run, or you are playing a football game and like you feel satisfied, you feel complete, like you feel like a job is well done. And the thing about pornography is that you have this cycle that you kind of begin to fall into, where you are always checking out porn, and you're always checking out porn, and always checking out porn, and those endorphins start to kind of pop off. They start to just fill your mind, because too much endorphins is not a good thing. Because then when you reach the point where you feel satisfied, where you feel complete, where you feel done, it never feels that way. You never can be completely satisfied. You never can be completely happy. You never can be completely fulfilled. That's what happens when you are having those long effects of pornography. And yeah, like this is a normal thing. Like you run through that reward system when you are married and you're having sex with your husband or your wife. Like that's a normal thing. Like you run through the dopamine process and you run through the endorphin process. Like as you're engaging in sexual activities, like that's something that's going to happen. However, when looking at porn, these chemicals get released and the excitement is overpowering. And when it's time for that second reward system to kick in, you can't feel satisfied. You just can't. So what do we do? We keep looking. We keep searching. We keep looking at porn. We keep searching for porn, and those cravings never satisfy. Just like a drug user looking to get a high again. Like it never is completely satisfied. Like yeah, like the itch may be gone, and yeah, like it may satisfy for a moment, but that hole is still there, and that feeling of like not being completely satisfied is still there. And just like a drug addict, it takes more and more drugs to complete the same high as before. If I wanted to get high, I need more drugs to get to that same high because now my body's used to it. You see, it's the same thing for any kind of addiction of anything, really. Let's just take caffeine, for instance. So in high school, I drank a ton of energy drinks. Like, not good for your body, not good for your well-being. But man, I would stop on my way at our little corner little gas station there right across from the high school, and I would grab a Mountain Dew amp and I'd pay for it, and I'd walk out the door and I would have it chug before I even got back across the street to school. And that felt great. Like it was like, man, like I'm awake, I'm alive, like I'm jittery, like this is perfect. Like this is what I want to be. Like I want to have that able to pay attention really well. That's kind of what caffeine, I felt, did. So then as my body got used to having one, I had to increase it to two, because I would get tired like middle of the day, right? Like so noon rolls around and I'm just exhausted. I'm like, I better have another energy drink. And so I would have another one. And then by the end of the day, like I was like, man, I don't even know how I'm going to do homework tonight. So I stopped by the rock stop on my way home and grabbed a third one. And then I would not be able to completely be ready for whatever I was doing that night. And I would need another one just to kind of make it through. So I went from having one a day, and in the span of a couple months, going to 1 to 4 a day. And I realized, man, I have a huge problem here. First off, it's expensive. But secondly, I was putting this stuff in my body, and it was not healthy. It was not good by any means. It got to the point that it was so bad where I could chug a Mountain Dew. I can still chug a Mountain Dew and it has no effect on me, which is awful. It's terrible to be at that point. It's awful. Now let's take porn. You watch a video and you're satisfied. You feel good. But then the next time you come back to it, that one video isn't enough. So you go to a second one. And that did it. That did the trick. But then you come back again and it's like, man, these videos don't even do anything for me anymore. Like I'm not excited. I don't feel that anyway. So then you start looking for other things and you start going down these other different black holes and different types and different whatever. We're not going to get into that. We don't need to get into that. But you start thinking and looking for more and more and more and more and more, and then your thoughts are consumed by it. Like, oh, like maybe I should look up this instead, or you start fantasizing about it more and more as you're out throughout your normal day. Like you're not even at home anymore looking at it, but the mindset is just there. Like the porn is just kind of seeped into your brain. And so you watch it more and more and more. And then when you get home, you watch it. And it goes from sun up to sundown in a heartbeat because you're just consumed by it. the reality of life, real life, and fake begin to be blurred. And when you get married and you get to have sex with your husband or your wife, your view of what sex is has only been based on what you've seen on a screen. It's only been based on what that has only been based on that. And has only been what is able to be satisfy you. And you begin to think about that and you experience it. And then guess what? That's not the same experience you're going to have when you marry your husband or your wife and you begin to have sex in the confines of marriage. Like, that's not going to be the same thing. Not even close. And it's a rude awakening. It's a rude awakening. And I don't know about you, but I call that an addiction. And you may think I can quit whenever I want to. Smokers have been saying that literally for years. I can quit whenever I want to. I can put it down whenever I want to. And we know the harmful effects of smoking, but yet we do nothing about it. So yes, porn is affecting our brain, and it's also affecting our heart. Let's take a look at this video.
In the 13th century, the Emperor Frederick II decided to conduct an experiment. He wanted to know what language children would speak on their own if no one ever taught them any. He assigned nurses to 50 babies, telling them to feed and bathe the children in absolute silence. No speaking, no eye contact, no lullabies or cuddles. So, what language did they speak? Frederick never found out. All of them died. To this day, it's well known that human beings suffer when they're deprived of love and touch. Even when they're taken care of in other ways, those deprived of affection grow sickly. Their physical and mental development is stunted, and in some cases, they even die. Consider the heart. Consider the things we do every day for connection and for love. People run into burning buildings and dive into frigid lakes for love. They move their homes, change their names, spend their fortunes, and step in front of bullets, all in this passionate pursuit of the human heart, to love and be loved. This longing is so powerful that we will sometimes pursue any way of feeling connected, even when that involves nothing more than pornographic images on a screen. When the images end, of course, there is no one to talk with, no one to share with, and none of the give and take of being with another person. And despite claims that porn will make you a better lover, study after study confirms the opposite. Porn users express less love for their partners and become more critical of appearances and less able to perform sexually. Other studies found users more disrespectful and aggressive within intimacy and less willing to stick around in a relationship. Bottom line, pornography is a scientifically proven guide to being a bad lover in virtually every imaginable way. In addition to impacting who we love and how we see them, it changes how much we're able to actually express that love. So think twice about giving your heart to something without a pulse. Sure, machines can meet all sorts of physical needs. A furnace can keep you warm, a respirator can keep you breathing, but no machine can ever satisfy your basic need to bond with another human being. Choose love, real love, which is the sweetest of all human experiences. Accept no frauds and no substitutions. The deepest needs of your own fragile heart can only be met in the fragile heart of another person.
You see, many adults never have the chance to learn what a healthy relationship is without first viewing porn. Before porn teaches them its version, which is typically filled with violence, abuse, infidelity. I mean, it's awful. And since most people aren't too excited about the idea of being in an abusive relationship, when the time comes for you to begin a relationship, when the time comes for you to be part of a relationship, no one wants that. You see, the sexual education that youth have gotten from porn makes it hard for them to connect with real romantic partners. And as people get older and they get into relationships, porn promises a virtual world full of sex, filled with sex, more sex, better sex. But what it doesn't mention, however, is that the further a user goes into this fantasy world, this world that is created, the more likely the reality is just going to become the opposite. Studies actually show that users who keep using porn, it actually leads to less sex, less satisfying sex, and many users, porn eventually means it leads to no sex at all. Porn affects the way we love. When porn is being viewed, we get this idea that sex should be this way, and when it fails to live up to that, because you see, porn is Hollywood. It's a created environment. None of that stuff really is happening. I mean, sure, you get these amateur videos or these real life videos that they play up. They play up to make it look real life, but it's not. It's a created environment, and we think that it must be our partner. We think that we're failing in some way because I'm not feeling satisfied, and you're not satisfying me, and you're a terrible partner. Or even worse, we get to the point where we prefer the screens over our wife and our husband. What a terrible place to be in. You see, this unknowingly changes our view of men, our view of women, our view of relationships, our view of love. Porn kills love. It kills it. It ruins it. And it's doing it faster than you think. This whole porn train can stop, though. It can stop. You can make it stop. And if this is something that you're struggling with, know that you're not alone. You have friends, you have leaders who are struggling with this too. Like, we've been there. And I wish I had someone telling me the effects of porn. And someone would have been there to correct my thoughts. You see, I thought watching porn was better than going out and having sex, right? But turned out the effects are just the same. Turns out the effects are just as harmful. It affected how I loved and how I wanted to be treated. It affected my heart. It affected my brain. And I can promise you this, that if you're here, if this is what you're struggling with porn and masturbation, because generally one does not go without the other, it is affecting your heart and it is affecting your brain. But something else that's being affected right now that we don't really know the whole scale of yet is our world. Take a look at this video.
On April 25th, 2015, an earthquake hit Nepal. Within 54 seconds, it had leveled over 500,000 homes and killed nearly 10,000 people. It was devastating. But what happened next was incredible. Almost immediately, neighbors from China rushed across the border to clear rubble. Within 15 minutes, India had mobilized a full-scale relief effort, including medical supplies and rescue dogs. Before the day was over, people, money, and supplies were pouring in from 60 countries, 35 relief organizations, and countless businesses. Consider the world. More than ever before, we're able to help reduce human suffering anywhere, from natural disasters to a child's medical bills. In a remarkable way, technology can focus our attention and rally us around a single worthy cause, combining millions of individual acts of kindness into a massive force for good. Or combining millions of individual selfish acts into a massive force for harm. If the private act of viewing porn can rewire a brain, devastate a relationship, and destroy a family, what happens when that act is multiplied by 100 million? What happens when it isn't just you seeking ever more explicit pornographic material, but your next door neighbor, your teacher, your doctor? What happens when it's half your country? Today's rising generation is facing the issue of pornography at a level our world has never seen. In 2015, 4.3 billion hours of pornography were watched on a single website. That's 500,000 years. What are the consequences of 4 billion hours when pornography has been shown to increase marital infidelity by over 300%? What are the consequences when 88% of the scenes depict aggression or violence? What are the consequences when the porn industry has now been linked to abuse on set, child exploitation, and even human trafficking? When we discover that products are tied to abusive things, like child labor, we're willing to change what we buy. Isn't it time we had the same conversation about pornography's human impact? Somewhere, right now, actual lives are being made far worse by the million little mouse clicks around the world. So, choose love and humanity. Click on something else, take a stand, and pour your time and energy into something, anything, that might just make this world a little better for all of us.
Porn affects our world today. Because guess what? Sex sells. I don't need to tell you this. I think that you know this. I mean, look at movies, look at whatever. If there's not some hot guy or hot girl in it, like, do those movies do that well? Most likely not. It's definitely a shift that we are seeing. And in this world that we're in right now, we're sex hungry. We say we find beauty in you, but to find beauty in you, like inside of you, but that's not what our culture is pumping us full of. And watching porn is just the norm. I bet if we were to survey and say, hey, how many of your friends that you go to school with, would have had conversations with you that say, man, I checked out this great video last night and of porn and it was awesome. I mean, how many of you could say, like, yeah, like that's conversations I've had with my friends. And maybe you haven't, and that's a really good thing. But I know that's definitely not the norm. Most hands would probably go up, or at least many hands would go up. And watching porn is just this norm. This is the culture that we're living in now. We don't have to go through the whole fact that the porn industry is being linked to human trafficking, to drug abuse, and other addictions, other problems. Did you catch that video, what it said? 4-point-something billion hours of pornographic videos were being watched, not on like 6 websites, 1 website. That's equivalent to 500,000 years. And that was 2 years ago. 2015. This is 2017, almost 2018. And I bet those numbers are even more now. So what kind of effects are we going to have in this world? So what happens when we keep picking porn over real relationships? I don't know, because this has never been seen before. But too much of a good thing normally does not always end in a good thing. It almost always ends in a bad way. Do you know that, the porn industry makes a ton of money, and porn stars make a ton of money as well, and they mostly do it for the money, and once they get in, they make the money, and but then something else happens too to these stars. They begin to having to cope with this abuse, this abusive relationships that they're having to fake and they're having to do, and they begin to kind of cope that with drugs. And so they make the porn to make the money to buy the drugs to bury the pain of making the porn, and then they make the porn to buy the money, to make the money to buy the drugs to bury the pain of making the porn. And it's a cycle that just keeps going and going and going and going. So how can our world not be affected by this? I hope that you find this troubling. I know I do. And something else I found troubling was that all the research that I shared with you today was not from some great Christian-based organization. It's from the secular world. It's from just a website called Fight the New Drug. It's from a secular website, and people have been seeing this become an issue more and more and more, and they're not afraid to say anything. But what about church? When was the last time you heard a message about the harmful effects of pornography and masturbation? To be honest, I never spoke of it. I never spoke on it. And sure, we lump it together with when covering things like lying and cheating and theft, and oh yeah, don't watch porn either. But when was the last time you heard a message about the effects of pornography? I mean, when I was in high school, we covered porn when we talked about staying pure until marriage. Like, sure, we covered it then, but we were all too embarrassed to say that we dealt with it. We didn't want to be that person like, oh yeah, I struggle with it. But we all knew that we all did. But we didn't want to lean on each other and help each other out. We did the whole, I can quit at any time. You see, our world is being affected, and we're being exposed to sex all over the place, and it sucks. But there's hope. There is hope. Our hope is found in Jesus. I mean, what does God say about porn and masturbation in the Bible? Not much. Not much, actually. God does not say porn is wrong. He doesn't say those words, nor does he say that masturbation is wrong. Again, not using those terms. Nowhere. However, God does talk about sexual immorality, about lusting and fleshly desires. And I think all 3 of those hit the nail on the head when talking about porn. I want you to go ahead and flip open to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, and we're going to be right at the beginning of that chapter there. And Paul's writing to the church of Thessalonica, and this church was, back in the Stone Ages where they did not have internet or cameras, and but the church had sexual desires, and Paul is giving them instructions on how to live a life that is pleasing to God. Here's what Paul wrote. 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, or chapter 4, verse 1 through 8. Finally then, brothers, we ask and urge you in the Lord Jesus that as you received from us how you ought to walk and to please God, just as you are doing, that you do more and more. For you know what instructions we gave you through the Lord Jesus. For this is the will of God, your sanctification, that you abstain from sexual immorality, that each one of you know how to control his own body in holiness and honor, not in passion of lust like the Gentiles, who do not know God, that no one transgresses and wrongs his brother in this matter, because the Lord is an avenger in all these things, as we told you beforehand and solemnly warned you. For God has not called us for impurity, but in holiness. Therefore, whoever disregards this disregards not man, but God, who gives his Holy Spirit to you. You see, God's will for your life is sanctification. Meaning that you are in the process of rooting out sin, that you are moving from the process of being a sinner to now you're going into this whole I'm becoming more like Jesus thing. This is what God wants for your life. He wants you to be an ever-chasing and ever-follower of Jesus. Paul goes on to list some of these areas that the believers need to look at in their lives. And lo and behold, the first thing he comes to is what? Sexual immorality. Sexual immorality. This was a huge issue. Did they have porn? No. There was no computers. There was no internet. There was no TV. There was no cameras. I don't know. Maybe they drew pictures. But no, I don't think their porn even exists back then. But man, I think that sexual fulfilling, the desire to be sexually fulfilled and wanting to engage in sexual dealings were not uncommon. Even here, when Paul was writing to the early church, of course, back then, the men in that culture, they would get married, and then they would do this kind of crazy thing where if their wife was unable to satisfy them or didn't want to or whatever, they would just go out and find a hooker, find a prostitute, and they would engage in sexual dealings with them. And Paul's saying, stop! This is a huge issue. Stop it! Paul's here saying, stay away from that. Don't have sex outside of marriage. Don't be involved in adultery. Stop going after the prostitutes. Don't be involved with sexual sin. Abstain from it. Flee from it. You see, we're all wired to want intimacy with the opposite sex. It's this feeling that drives us to start being curious online and leads us into this rabbit hole that eventually maybe leads to pornography. And Paul is saying, don't go down this road. Abstain from it. And Paul goes on to say that we should control our bodies, not allow our desires of our flesh to control us, that we shouldn't allow our body to control our thoughts and our actions. And Paul's really getting at here is self-control. We should flee from those desires, the desires that say, I can watch porn and I'm going to do it just this last time, just this last time. Any of us do that? Just this last time, God, I promise, just this last time and then I'm done. I know it's wrong, but one last time we try to justify our actions by giving God an ultimatum, I'll do this last time, God, but I need you to do this for me. What are we offering exactly? What, our loyalty? That's a joke, right? That we won't do it again? But we know wholeheartedly that as soon as we leave from our Bible study or our quiet time or our time in prayer, we're going to go do it. I would do this. I would abstain for a little bit, and then, man, it would come back like a raging fire, and I would fail because, you see, I was selfish. I had selfish desires, and I was not pursuing after Jesus. Listen to the next part in verse 5. It says this. It says, not in passions of lust like the Gentiles who do not know God. not in passions of lust. Lust is when you look at a guy or a girl with sexual intentions, that you want to have sex with them, that you are daydreaming about them, that you think that they would look great naked. Like, that is not a good thing. And Jesus even addressed it in Matthew chapter 5. He says, I say to you that anyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery in his heart. Every time you look at porn, you're lusting. Every time you see a hot girl or a hot guy and you begin to daydream about them sexually, you're lusting. And to do so is to commit adultery. See, God has called us to be holy, to continue this passage of sanctification, and it's not easy. I get that. I know it's not easy. But don't we feel bad about this? I think we do. I know we do. I think we all feel bad about this. Like when we mess up and we watch porn and we masturbate. Don't we feel bad about it? Because I know we do, because guess what? It's not normal. It's not something we should be doing. It's an addiction that we can't seem to break. It's a challenge, it's a struggle, and if it were easy, wouldn't we all walk away from it? Because man, I remember those feelings of just like inadequacy and feeling just like just trash afterwards. If it was easy, wouldn't we all walk away from it? I don't think any of us would struggle with this. I heard a saying that goes something like this, that Satan used to be really crafty when he came to putting up traps for people and creating those sinful like bondages. And what he would do is that's what he would do. Like, he'd be crafty and he'd be creative, and then he got lazy and he just created porn. There's an author, Dobson. He says that 95% of men struggle with this, and the other 5 are lying. Just a crazy stat, and I don't believe that's true. I believe that's something that I believe that it's something that many of us do struggle with. All of us, no, but many of us, yes. All of us here most likely will be exposed to porn at some point. We have to talk about this. We have to address it, and we have to find freedom from it. But here's a few practical steps we can take. Here are some steps that we can take to hopefully find freedom. The first one is this: realize that porn and masturbation is hurtful. If we don't get to this point first, we're not going to think anything about porn or masturbation. It's not going to change what we think. It's not going to change what we do. Or it's not going to change how we act. We have to get to the point where we believe that porn is hurtful. Hurtful to us, hurtful to our society, hurtful to the world, hurtful to our future relationships, hurtful for our marriage. We have to realize that porn is hurtful. And if we don't get to this point, then we can't move forward. But if we can get to that point, the second step is this: we have to be honest. We have to admit that we have a problem. So yes, we admit that porn is hurtful to us, and yes, I have an addiction, I have a problem, help me. So we can move forward and we can get that help. We have to be honest. And third is this: we have to seek help. We have to seek it. We have to find help. We have to go out there and find someone that we can confide in, whether it's a friend, a mentor, a leader, here, right now, today. Find someone that you can confide in. Find someone who has beaten this, though. Find someone who maybe struggled with pornography, and you go, hey, you struggled with this, okay? How do you overcome it? That person has to be able to give you practical advice to go forward. If it does no good to have someone who struggles with the same thing you're struggling with and try to give you advice about it, it's not going to work that well. I did this in college where my freshman year, we had a big group together going, hey, let's all help each other out with this because we all struggle with it. And guess what? None of us were able to overcome that. None of us. We were terrible accountability partners. But find someone who has overcome it, who has struggled with porn, who has overcome it. That's the person you want to find. Fourth is this: you have to put up safeguards. This one's going to hurt a little more because you're going to feel like you're losing freedom. But if you are serious about getting out of this pit, then you have to change what you're doing. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. And this may mean taking the internet off your phone. It may mean putting XXX church browser on there and having whatever you search go to your accountability partner. It may mean leaving your phone outside the bathroom or not taking your phone with you to the bedroom when you go to sleep at night, but leaving it in the kitchen to charge. I mean, is it really that hard to go get a $5 alarm clock from Walmart? It also means telling your parents. Now this is going to hurt. This is going to be hard to do. It means coming clean to your folks. And they are most likely going to put up safeguards for you as well, that you feel like your freedom is just being constricted and confined. But they're doing it because they love you. You see, your parents know right now that this is a conversation we're having. I met with them. I talked with them. Some of you guys are actually in the room. But I talked to your parents about this. I gave them material to read for parents and how they address this with you as their students, as their child. Like, we wanted to equip everyone as best we could about dealing with this issue. Because we don't want to just talk about it and just let it go. This is going to be an ongoing thing. This is going to be something that we have to battle. It's something we have to fight. And your parents are there because they love you and they care for you and they want what's best for you. And they want to help you find freedom from porn and from masturbation. Last step. Probably easily the most important step. Probably should be the first step. Is to pursue Jesus. Pursue Jesus. When your desire for Jesus is greater than your desire for touching yourself, when your desire for Jesus is greater than your fleshly desires, that's where you'll find freedom that is unmatched to anything you've ever experienced. When you lay your burden at the cross, that 100-pound boulder that you were carrying feels less and less. It feels lighter and lighter. And you begin to feel better and better. Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are heavy burdened, and I will give you rest." Jesus is where we find our freedom, the freedom from sin. When we begin to chase after Him, Jesus takes those temptations, those desires, those sins, and He makes them more manageable to us. They feel pretty small, and we feel like we can just squash them like a bug. See, Jesus is in the whole thing about helping us to get over this, helping us to find freedom. But we have to start chasing Him first. We have to be seeking Him. We have to begin seeking Him. Porn is a killer. Porn kills love. Don't let it kill yours.